Hi guys, this is Ms. Miner, and this is lesson 2D. 2D. I'll put that on there. And our goal for this lesson is to be able to solve a literal equation for a given variable. And what we're going to do is we're going to introduce some additional variables into our problem. So let's just kind of like think about this for a minute. Let me just get a blank screen here. Let's just like use a normal equation like what we're used to first, right? 2x plus 4 equals 6. Okay, so I want to solve this for x. Remember, my goal is to get x by itself so that I can know what x is equal to, right? And so the first thing that I would do in this situation is I would get rid of the things that are like attached to my x, right? First, I would get rid of this extra hostage by subtracting 4 from both sides. And this would go to 0, right? And then I would have 2 x's left over. And these are multiplying, remember, because there's nothing in between. There's not a plus or a minus in between. And so they're being multiplied. And then I divide by 2. And so x equals 1, right? These are going to go to 1, and then 2 divided by 2 is 1. So that's just our regular normal equation solving. And we can't forget that we know how to do that, because when we start introducing more variables into our equation, the procedure of how we solve these equations doesn't change. We still want to get rid of the number that, or the thing, right, that is not connected to the variable that I want, and then I want to divide by the coefficient. So let's just kind of in our minds like do this in a little bit different way, okay? So here's the exact same problem, except this time I'm using symbols instead of numbers, right? I mean, this is literally the exact same problem that we had. Here's our 2x. We'll say this is minus 4. I think I had a plus 4 there before, right? But that's okay. So here's the exact same problem, but instead of having usually what we have is numbers, right? I've replaced it with symbols this time. So if I want to get a specific symbol by itself, right? Because remember, a variable is just a symbol or a representation of a number. And so when we start working with more than one variables, we're really just working with representations of numbers instead of like the number itself, right? So let's say I want to get star by itself. Well, star is kind of like our x, right? It's in the same place as our x was before. So if I wanted to get the star by itself, what I would first have to do is get rid of any numbers or representations of numbers that were not attached to my star. So that would be the heart, and the heart represents like the number 4 was before, right? So what I want to do here is, here's my equal sign. I'm going to add a heart. But whatever I do on one side, I have to do on the other. So I'm going to add a heart to the other side of my equal sign. And it doesn't matter what number the heart represents. If I'm subtracting a heart and I add a heart, right, they're going to go to 0. There's no more hearts left. And so what I have left over now is arrow times star is equal to check mark plus heart. And I don't know what these numbers are in this case, check mark plus heart, so I just leave them. I don't actually have to solve anything here. I'm just going to kind of rearrange the configuration of my symbols in order to get star by itself. So the last thing that I would want to do here is divide by the arrow, because the arrow is the number that's holding on to my star, and divide over here by my arrow. these arrows will cancel because they represent the same number. And all I'm left with is star. Well, remember, when I'm working with symbols or representations of numbers, I don't necessarily know what those numbers are. And so I can't actually, let's say, do the math for that. I just kind of rearrange the way things are to have star by itself. So in this case, star, I'm going to move this over. Sorry, let me erase that really quick. And then let me move this over so I can, star is equal to check mark plus heart divided by arrow. And so really all I did was like rearrange the furniture, right, in order to get star by itself. And that's really all that we do when we have letters representing numbers, right? We're just going to rearrange those letters in such a way that now I have the one that I want by itself. So let's kind of see how that works. Here is a two-variable equation. This is a two-variable equation. So I have an x is representing some number, right? And this y is representing some number. I want to solve this equation to get y by itself. My instructions say solve for y. So the first thing that I want to do is, here's the number the y is holding on to. So it's not going to go first, right? This 5x over here, that's my extra hostage. So it's going to go first. I'm going to minus the 5x's off of this side. But that means I have to minus 5x's over on this side. And really, I'm just rearranging this problem. I am not like actually going to solve anything or do any math. Because if you look over on this side of my equation now, sorry, I should draw my line down. It's all hooked together. Okay. The 15 cannot be combined with the minus 5x, right? They are two different terms. They don't have the same last name. So I'm just going to leave this side. I'm going to change colors here when I rewrite. I'm just going to leave this side as 15 minus 5x. And then over on this side, I have left over my 3y. Now I'm not done yet because I want y by itself. I want y to equal something over here. So the last thing that I have to do is divide this by 3, right? But that means I have to divide this other side by 3. So I just take each individual term and divide it by 3. Just like when we multiplied everything by 2 to get rid of fractions, we do the same thing when we're dividing. So I divide by 3 on both sides. These two cancel, and I get y by itself over here. On this side, I'm just going to divide these individual terms. So 15 divided by 3 gives me 5. And then negative 5 divided by 3, I can't do that. That gives me a decimal. So I just leave it as negative 5 thirds x. What does y equal? It equals 5 minus 5 thirds x. And that is what y equals, right? If we knew what x was or what number x represented, and someday we will, someday we will know what either x or y represents, then we could solve the rest of this equation and find out what what number y was actually equal to. But in this case, we just leave it. And remember, this is kind of just like rearranging things so that I get the variable that I'm interested in all by itself. Okay, so here's another problem. And this is just kind of another representation. And what we're going to do is we're going to solve this equation for x, right? And so this is just to remind you guys that you know how to do this. We're not changing the rules of solving equations here. I'm going to get rid of the number that is not connected to my variable I'm interested in. So minus 4. This goes to 0. And 2x is equal to 12. Divide by 2. This cancels. X equals 12 divided by 2, which is 6, right? Okay, So that's what we do when we have numbers, right? Because I can combine these together and I know what the 16 minus 4 is. It's 12, right? And then I know what 12 divided by 2 is. The only difference when we start changing these things to variables is that now I won't be able to do like the calculation part of it. But the steps, the procedures, they're all the same. So if I take this same problem now, oh, well, now I've erased that was the letter C. I didn't know that would erase. Okay, that was the letter C. So now if I take these, instead of having, sorry, that's the letter C. Instead of having numbers here, if I replace these, this does not want to work, with letters, right? Then I'm going to solve it exactly the same way as if they were numbers, right? Remember, in order to get x by itself, the first thing that I did was get rid of the thing that was not connected to my x, right? So in this case, 4 is now a g. So I'm going to minus the g, right? Here's my equal sign. That means I have to minus g from this side. These two are going to cancel because they're both g's. They represent the same number. And so what I have left is yx equals c minus g. And I can't actually do that calculation because c and g are different letters. They represent different numbers. And in this case, I wouldn't know what those numbers were. So then the last step, remember, is always divide by the number that is attached to or connected to my variable that I'm interested in. And so I would divide by y here, and those two y's would cancel. And then I would divide these things over here by y. And because I don't know what those numbers represent, I don't have any actual calculation to do. So my answer is c minus g divided by y. I just leave it. Okay. Let's do one more, okay? And this is where we start to see how solving literal equations can be useful. Because let's say I want to solve this equation to get the radius by itself, right? I need to know what the radius of this circle is, and all I have available to me is what the circumference is. So let's solve this for radius. Well, right now I have a 2 and it's multiplying by pi, and pi is multiplying my radius. And so if I want to get radius all alone by itself, this r represents the radius of the circle. And remember, the radius is the distance from the center to the outside edge. Let's pretend that my circumference of this circle I know is equal to 6, right? So I have to solve this to get the radius by itself so that I can figure out what circumference is. Figure out what radius is. So I want to get radius by itself. Right now it's being multiplied by 2 and pi. And so what I can do is divide by 2 and pi, and then that will get radius by itself, right? But if I divide by 2 and pi on the right-hand side of my equation, I have to divide by 2 pi on my left-hand side of my equation. So these two cancel, right? 2 pi is going to cancel. And radius of the circle is equal to the circumference divided by 2 times pi. So now I could plug in my 6 in for my circumference, 6 divided by 2 pi, and I could calculate exactly what the radius of the circle is, right? Divide here, 3 divided by pi. 3 divided by pi would equal the radius, and pi is equal to about 3.14. So in this case, let's just round it and say 3 divided by 3. So the radius would be, right, this would be 3 divided by 3.14. But if we round 3.14 up, just for to make it easy, right, to make the math easy, then my radius would be about 1, and we could say maybe this was centimeters, then this would be about 1 centimeter. Okay, so literal equations help us when we need to figure out what a given variable is, when we need to solve an equation for a given variable. And so literal equations help us do those kinds of things. All right, that looks like that's the end of our lesson for today. So good luck on your assignment. Remember, if you have any questions, please email me or Mrs. Zeider, or you're welcome to join us on our Google Meets Wednesday at 3 o'clock in the afternoon. Good luck, you guys.